Welcome to Homegrown in the Heart. This is LGP's podcast, where we sit down with special people, people that we love, people that love the Yakima Valley, and we talk about how they got here, what they do, and we just have a conversation that really hopes to highlight some of the things that are very special about this place where we all live, where we call it home, and it's known to every one of us as the heart of Washington. Today, we've got a special guest. He wasn't homegrown in the heart, but he's been adopted into the family. It's Don Meyers. Don works with the Yakima Herald-Republic. He is a ace reporter who has done an incredible amount of fantastic work reporting on things around this valley. We're going to talk a little bit about his work, how he got to where he got, from where he came from, and what he loves about being a journalist here in the heart of Washington. Don, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Let's dive right in. I want to go back. I think when I first met you, it was back in about 2014, and you were on the way from, I know it's Utah, but here in Washington, we call it a southern state, okay? You were coming from Utah up to Yakima for a new journey or a new venture in your life.
Yeah, new chapter, you might say.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about before you got here, and it was 2014.
Yes.
Before you got here, what did you do in Utah?
Immediately before I got here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, at that time I was working at the Salt Lake Tribune,
Okay.
which is the largest paper in the state of Utah.
All right.
Yep.
And what were you doing? What were you doing for the Salt Lake Tribune?
Okay, I was a general assignment reporter covering primarily Utah County, which is where Provo is.
Okay.
It's just south of Salt Lake City.
Okay.
And I was also running a database that we had at the Tribune that listed various public records, including salaries of public officials, court records, and similar things.
Okay. So let me ask you this: how long had you been in this? I'm gonna refer to it as journalism, right? And I know that's a very broad category, but how long had you been involved in telling people's stories in journalism at the Tribune, and give us a little bit of a history of your path before you get called to the promised land here in Yakima.
Okay, well, how far back do you want me to go?
You can go back as far as you'd like to. College is a great place to start.
Okay. Well, let's see. I attended a junior college in New Jersey.
Okay,
where
wow.
I majored in communications with an emphasis in print journalism.
Okay.
And then I transferred to Brigham Young University, where I majored in journalism.
Okay. Well, let me stop you there. How would you end up in Jersey? Are you an East Coast guy and then a West Coast guy? Or?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, where were you born?
In New Jersey.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, there's a fact. Did not know that about Don Meyers. You come from the East, and you obviously got the reverse of William O. Douglas's book, Go East, Young Man. You took it to Go West, Young Man.
Yeah.
All right. So you graduate from what college?
Brigham Young University.
Okay, but prior to that?
Brookdale Community College.
All right. And so from Brookdale, you end up in Provo.
Well, I went to school in Provo,
Okay.
then went back to New Jersey for a couple years.
Okay.
And decided I didn't like living back east anymore.
Okay. And so you get a call to come back out west?
I started looking for jobs in Utah and got one at the paper in Provo.
Okay.
Where I worked for about 13 years.
Okay. And then let me ask you this, what got you interested in, and whenever I think of journalists, I think of people who they're committed to telling somebody else's story, the facts surrounding somebody else's life or some other incident. What got you committed to that as a career path?
Well, it was something I was interested in, and as we say in journalism, we write the first rough draft of history.
Okay, I like that.
And, it's a chance to, just be there as a witness to history.
Okay. And so when you come out to Utah, Where was your first official job as a writer, working for as a journalist?
My first full-time post-college gig,
Yeah.
that was at a now-defunct paper called The Register
Okay.
in Monmouth County, New Jersey.
Okay. And what'd you write about?
I covered 4 communities, and going from one of them was Long Branch, this one-time beach resort that had fallen on really hard times.
Okay.
Its most famous role in history is the place where James Garfield died.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, and then also covered three other towns. One of them a very upscale community in the horse country out there. Yes, New Jersey has horse country.
Okay. That's right.
And one was a military base town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You land out in Utah, and you've got another journalistic gig. I want to
Yes.
call it a gig. I don't know if that's even the right term. Probably a job is what you
Job.
call it.
Yes.
Okay. So where's that take you?
To Provo, Utah, to the Daily Herald.
Okay. And what are you writing about there?
Okay, I started out as a environmental reporter and also covering the city of Orem,
Okay.
and which is next to Provo. And for the techies in the audience, Orem was the home of WordPerfect.
Oh, okay. Wow. The
Yeah.
founders, it was created in Orem, Utah.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. I did not know that. And so what do you recall about some of the pieces that you wrote about during that season of your life?
Well, let's see. I covered, as I said, a lot of the air quality issues because
Okay.
Provo at one point had like the worst air quality in the nation.
Okay.
Particularly like with carbon monoxide.
Okay. Okay. You and I know you got an award. Was it from the EPA?
Yes.
Yeah.
I received the Environmental Excellence Award from the EPA in that region.
Okay.
And it's the highest award the EPA gives to non-EPA employees.
Right.
And I was told I was like the second journalist to ever receive that award.
That's fantastic, and it was related to your work on the environment, right,
Yes.
in the Orem, Utah area.
Yeah, in the Utah County area.
Okay, that's fantastic. And tell me, how was there an interest in reporting or writing articles about environmental issues, or did the first thing happen, you got assigned this task to write about environmental issues, and then you became interested? Which came first?
Well, I got, that was the job that was open, covering both the environment and also the city of Orem.
Okay.
And basically just threw myself into the beat
Okay.
to the point where I actually had somebody ask if I actually worked in that industry.
That's great. That's great. So the job said, "Hey, here's the job," and then you threw yourself into it.
Yes.
And that's fantastic, because I think, Don, maybe I'm wrong here, is that oftentimes we feel like we all have to have this calling to a particular area, right? And so we're going to pursue our calling, when in fact, in reality, sometimes if we just get a job, a calling will appear from working hard every day. And it sounds like that was your case. Okay. Fantastic.
And during that time, I also covered the Utah legislature.
Okay.
Did that for like about 6 years.
Okay. And so you must have a background or some interest in all things political.
Well, a general interest in all things.
Okay.
I like to say journalism is a perfect career for a polymath.
Okay. And a polymath.
As somebody who has interests and knowledge of multiple subjects.
Okay. You got to be a curious person.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So from how many years again in Utah there before you headed north?
Okay, I was at the Herald for about, 13 years. the last 8 of it as the editorial page editor.
Okay.
Then I went to the Salt Lake Tribune for about 6 years.
Okay. I know you here in Yakima. I know you as you're sort of the crime and courts guy. But that wasn't was that did that start in Utah?
Well, let's see. I would say probably, well, in New Jersey, we were all assigned to go and get the police blotter information from the towns we covered.
Okay.
Yes, and some of these towns were so sleepy that you could actually put all of the crime into a police blotter.
Wow.
Yeah. And in Utah, at the Daily Herald, I also covered the first trial of a polygamist in 50 years in Utah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That had to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall, was there a exoneration or a conviction?
Oh, he was convicted.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because the attorney used a very novel approach.
Okay, tell me about it.
Okay, well, first, a little background. Utah's polygamy law basically defined it as somebody who was cohabiting with more than one woman.
Okay.
And the problem is it was written so loosely that, if my sister-in-law came over to visit, they could nail me because there's another woman living in the house.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So the law was basically unenforceable.
As written.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
But in this case, the prosecutor, decided to try a novel approach to it.
Okay.
What he did was he said, okay, because this guy, he would marry a woman, divorce her, then marry the next woman, divorce her, lather, rinse, repeat.
Okay. Okay.
And so but they were all still living together. So what he said is, okay, we will define the first wife as a common law wife under Utah law, because you're still holding yourself out in the community as married and such.
Okay.
So every time you got married, that was bigamy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so is he convicted? He convicted him on bigamy.
Oh, yes. And
wow.
I mean,
Okay.
It wasn't like he was denying it, because this guy had done was doing media tours for more than a decade, extolling his lifestyle.
Okay. Wow. As a polygamist.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, in the opening statement, the prosecutor pretty much just put up a best of reel of all of his appearances on various TV shows.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And we're talking news crews from Japan, France, all over.
Interviewing this guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not like, this guy was living in the heart of town.
Yeah.
It was about, a 4-hour drive out into the desert to his compound.
Okay.
And of that 4-hour trip, probably about 2.5 of it was on just a bladed path through the desert.
Oh man. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So how many wives was the guy eventually found to have been cohabitating with?
5.
Okay. Okay.
And he had 2 previous who he divorced and then married their daughters.
Oh my. Okay.
Yeah, from other men, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
And so basically, this was a man who's, had 2 ex-wives who were also his mothers-in-law. So.
Oh man. So what was the sentence?
Oh, he got 5 years.
Okay, 5 years. Wow.
And in the course of investigating the polygamy case, they discovered that his first wife was 13 when he married her, and he was 37.
Okay. That had to be a crime in and of itself.
Yes.
Okay.
So after the polygamy trial, they then turned around and tried him for statutory rape.
Wow.
And he was also convicted on that, and they just had the sentences run concurrently.
Okay. Wow. So you said that was the first trial, polygamy trial in 50 years?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, just because of the awkward way Utah's polygamy laws were written.
Right. Okay.
And, and this guy also said that he felt it was more of a show trial because it was on the advent of the 2002 Winter Games. and the prosecutor happened to be the brother of the governor.
Okay.
So, he was saying that, oh, well, they're just doing this because they want to project a good image to the world and tell all the other polygamists to just, lay low and,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not buying that one, but he thought that's what it was going to work for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's fast forward here. 2014. How does Don Meyer end up in Yakima? Tell us that story.
Let's see. The TLDR version is a hedge fund manager decided that his bonus was more important than the salaries of me and 19 of my colleagues.
Okay. So there's a downsizing of sorts.
Yes.
At least it appears that. But what you don't know is that paradise awaits.
Well, I put in job applications all over the place.
Okay.
And, my wife had been raised in the Valley, and she said, if we have to leave Utah, do you think you can get me at least closer to my family? And I said, well, we'll see.
Okay.
And then I got a tip from a friend that there was an opening at the Herald-Republic.
Okay.
Applied for it. And, came out, interviewed, and got the job. And my wife was like, I didn't think you'd get me this close.
That's fantastic. So she's homegrown.
Yes.
All right, that's fantastic. And so you land here in 2014. What's the first assignment that they put you on?
Okay. Well, I came into town on a Saturday night. It was, January 4th.
Okay.
And, get settled in, go grab some dinner, look at the paper, and the big front page story is about a SWAT standoff in Selah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the Jesse Humphreys case.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have a busy day.
That's your first assignment.
Yeah, then the Sunday paper comes, and there's about a Yakima police officer shot a man at a car wash on Nob Hill Boulevard.
Yep, know it well.
And it's like, okay, this is going to be a very busy first day.
Very good. And so were you crime in courts or?
Yes.
Okay. And you're assigned to a couple of interesting things just literally right out of the chute.
Yes.
Prior to coming to Yakima, what were you thinking? What did you know about the Valley? You're obviously, your wife being from here, you knew something about the Valley.
Oh yeah. Well, we would come up and visit the in-laws. So
Okay.
I would. So unlike a lot of people who apply for jobs here, I came in with my eyes wide open. So
Yeah.
I knew roughly what I was getting myself into.
Okay. Yeah.
The question is, do any of us really know what we're getting ourselves into?
Now, probably not until we're in the middle of it, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah, that seems to be sort of a rule of life.
In fact, I remember the one Utah governor saying that politics depends upon a steady supply of people who don't know what they are getting themselves into.
There you go. And a willingness to try to push forward regardless of what you find yourself in.
True.
So, yeah. You've covered crime in courts for a long time in the Yakima Valley. I really want, for people who watch the podcast and have an interest or a curiosity in journalism, tell us a little bit about what that's like, covering crime in courts, and think about people who may have an interest in someday doing what you do.
Okay. Let's see. Usually I start my day out reading the probable cause affidavits that are filed by the police.
Okay.
That come in because, in the afternoon they have the preliminary appearance hearing where people, come before the judge, and the judge decides if there is probable cause to, hold them over for trial.
Okay.
Yeah, so I go through those and decide, okay, which cases do we want to cover?
Okay.
Because this is not like, the sleepy towns I covered in New Jersey where we could put everything down in a police blotter. We have to do a little bit of triage and, and go for the most serious things going on.
And I take it Yakima's got a lot of action.
Yes.
In the crime arena, that you sort of have to pick and choose. What is it that you want to go and zero in on as a journalist?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, like drug cases, there are things that, like in New Jersey or Utah, we would have made a big deal out of, which here is like, that's a little penny ante.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from the probable cause reports, what's the next step for sort of a day in the life of Don?
Well, I check in with usually the Yakima police and the county sheriff's office to see if they had anything significant from overnight.
Okay.
And if there was something major from overnight, we'll write that up.
Okay.
And then also I have probably close to 200 cases I'm following in the court system.
Okay.
So I have to see, where they're at in the process, and
Wow. Okay.
and some of the ones that go to trial, we'll cover it gavel to gavel.
Okay.
In fact, I just got off one about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, that's right.
Yes.
That's right. So let me ask you this. People who, I hear a lot of people they'll read the paper and they'll have they'll complain about, well, all it is bad news in the paper. And I know that's actually not really accurate because there's a lot of good news, and we want to talk about some of the other stuff you're doing. But purpose of crime in the courts, what's the journalistic purpose for that?
Okay. Very simple. Of the three branches of government, the judicial branch is the only one that is legally empowered to deprive you of life, liberty, and property.
Okay.
And one of the principles we have in our government is that the judicial system is as open and transparent as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to go back to the days of the Star Chamber where people would just get disappeared into a system and nobody knows what happens then.
Okay.
So it's a matter of explaining what's going on in the court system,
Mm-hmm.
and also helping people to understand what's going on in your community and what are people doing to address it.
Excellent. Yeah. And I think that is, I don't think that's one of the best. That's an outstanding explanation of why it's important. Because oftentimes I'll see people read an article and they'll complain it's just bad news. I don't want to read. It's just bad news. But actually, it's information that says to us, right, as readers, consumers of that information, that look, this is what's happening in your town, in your city, and be aware of significant issues, and let's put them out there into the open, into the light, so that nothing is secreted away, so that, like you said, things happen and we have no idea that they've happened. That's a high calling.
Yeah. And, many times it's like, there will be like a plea deal or something, and I will call the prosecutor and say, why did you do this?
Yeah.
Because, some people will say, oh, you're just letting them off easy.
Right. Right. You hear that a lot.
And, and basically it's sort of holding the system to account, because it's like, okay, why did you have to do this? And, sometimes it's like, well, while we had evidence, there was also the possibility that, they could have, a jury could have not, acquitted them, and, they have to figure out what's the best route forward.
Okay. Let me ask a little bit about some of the other work that you're doing here in Yakima. And specifically, I want to talk about the historical pieces that I found, one, excellent work, and just fascinating about the stories. The most recent being about the conflicts between business and workers back in, the I want to say, was it the 30s?
Well, actually started in like the early 1900s.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that. I want to call it a project, but you do historical pieces about the valley that I think bring to life some of our roots, which are important.
Yes. In fact, how we got there is a very interesting story.
Okay. Tell me.
Well, I was given this assignment to write about how Toppenish was trying to revive the old sugar plant down there.
Yeah.
And I felt, it was important to not just say, oh, yeah, well, the sugar plant's here. It's like, well, how did they get here? which was, a very interesting story.
Okay.
It was actually a venture that started in Utah by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
They were trying to, be more self-sufficient. And one of the things they needed was sugar, and they decided they heard that you could get sugar out of sugar beets.
Okay.
And it took quite a bit of work to find a sugar beet that would actually survive in the western United States.
Okay.
And became a very thriving business, the Utah and Idaho Sugar Company. And they established a sugar plant here in Toppenish, along with Union Gap and Sunnyside, where they would process sugar beets into sugar, and we just laid that out, and people just loved the story.
Yeah, yeah. So sugar beets into sugar. Mm-hmm. Was that your first piece on the historical side?
Probably.
Okay.
That proved to be the genesis of the history column, because the editor who had assigned me the story, initially thought it's like, oh, this is just going to be one of those typical business stories. But, we had that historical element, and people were just eating it up. And it was like, okay, can you do this more often?
Yeah. No.
And so the history column was born.
Right on. Okay. And how long have you been doing the history column now? Because it's not that many years.
It's been about 7 years.
Okay. Okay. Longer than I even thought.
Yes.
Okay. See, I'm not reading enough news.
Yeah. In fact, our very first history column was about the lynching in Ellensburg in the 1890s.
Okay. Okay. And the most recent one that you just did, where we actually had walls around the courthouse.
Yes. A stockade.
A stockade.
Well, that's actually a reprise of a 2017 column I did.
Okay. Okay.
Basically because, some people think, oh, well, you can just knock that history column out. It's like, no, it takes a lot of work.
That's what I can only imagine. Okay. How much research do you spend, research time, getting your facts for the history columns?
It can take like, anywhere from a couple hours to like a couple days.
Okay.
To get the information.
Okay.
Because I'm always trying to shed additional light on a subject, which is why you will not see a history column that is just a biography of William O. Douglas.
Okay.
Because that field has been plowed way too thoroughly, especially by the man himself. So,
okay.
I mean, I can do a little bit of nibbling in the corners, but, you're not going to see a full biography of William O. Douglas.
Okay. What are some of your ideas that you're perking on? Can you give us sort of a preview in terms of history?
Well, let's see. Obviously, next year I'm going to be doing columns on the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe and Japan.
Okay. And you have a
and
whole
how Yakima Valley reacted to that.
Okay.
Because we did one in I think it was 2018 on the 100th anniversary of the armistice in World War I, and how the people of Yakima celebrated that. I mean, a spontaneous parade that was 10 blocks long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And a spontaneous parade, you say?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, at first the employees from the courthouse went out and paraded around. Pretty soon, there was a full-blown parade.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
What other ideas that you've got perking?
Let's see. We're always every February we highlight elements from Black history.
Okay.
And then in March we do women's history, highlighting some of the women in the valley.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. And have you done a history piece on that's related to Native Americans?
Several.
Okay, I was going to say, give me your take, Don, on the significance and the importance of local history here in the valley.
Well, you can't really understand the present without understanding what came before.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
In fact, when they were having the whole debate over the plaza in Yakima, it's like at that time I wrote a column about the Capitol Theater and how there was talk about let's just knock that down and make a parking lot. And instead, the city, took the very bold step of purchasing the building. And I think everybody would agree that the Capitol Theater is an asset to this community.
Right, right. It's a treasure.
Yeah, and it sort of, helped, show some perspective on the current debate that was going on, by saying, okay, we've been through this before.
Right, right.
And also the fact, like with Native Americans, as you would ask me, it's like, pretty much we are living on Yakima land, and I've always said that, white Europeans do not hold the monopoly on history.
Right.
So, I've written about, history from the Yakima perspective as well.
Okay.
Such as like with the Treaty of 1855, the Yakima War, and also, writing about some of the, Yakima leaders like Kamayakin and Ojai.
Okay. What are, let me shift gears slightly here. For viewers interested in a career in journalism, share some words of wisdom for these people, folks who may be saying, man, I might be interested in that as a career. What would you suggest to those folks?
I would say pursue it, because the paraphrase Mark Twain, the reports of journalism's death have been greatly exaggerated.
Okay.
I mean, yes, the industry is going through a rough time, but there's still a need for journalism.
Okay.
And especially from credible outlets.
Okay. And what's the impact? You mentioned the word credible, so I sort of target in on these words. Whole host of news sources out there now that, at least I think from people's perspective, they're not credible. They're reporting the big phrase now, right? That the byline is fake news, fake news. How prevalent is fake news? Is that a real concept that we're dealing and struggling with, or is it overblown from your perspective?
Well, we like to say that if it's fake, it's not news.
Okay.
But there is a lot of misinformation out there. And a big part of the problem is that a lot of people do not want to be informed. They want to be validated.
Oh.
So, I mean, you go on YouTube or the other social media and you'll see almost, it's almost choose your adventure as far as the news goes.
Okay.
And the thing is, you need, credible journalists who will be out there and just telling you everything that's, telling you what's going on.
Okay.
Without fear or favor.
So, people they don't want information, they want validation. Okay.
There's a lot of people who believe that, yes.
All right. So let me ask you this. How does the journalist today go about making sure that the information they're providing to people is not simply just a validation of somebody's thinking or thoughts? How do you go about doing that in sort of boots on the ground, day-to-day operations?
Well, it's pretty much, like you said, boots on the ground. You got to be out there and, see for yourself.
And work hard.
Yes.
I don't get the impression that journalism is for the faint of heart, number one, nor is it for folks who don't want to actually work hard.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, there was a great book I read in college, and I now have it in my personal collection. It's called Witness of a Century by George Seldes.
Okay.
He was this journalist who had worked throughout the majority of the 20th century. He was a World War I correspondent. He covered the Russian Revolution, the Spanish Revolution, and all these other things. And a lot of his stories, kind of, bucked the conventional wisdom of the time. And people would say, well, how could you write that? And he said, because I was there.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, he was, in Moscow and witnessed, as what John Reed said, the 10 days that changed the world.
Yeah.
And he also scored an interview with Field Marshal Hindenburg right after the armistice, where Hindenburg said, Germany lost on the battlefield. We had no more fresh troops, and the Americans just overwhelmed us.
Okay.
But because other war correspondents didn't get that scoop, they persuaded the military powers to censor it and not allow it out. And one could argue that contributed to, Hitler's stab in the back theory gaining traction with the German people.
Okay. What's the risk that we face, just from your perspective, on this idea of censorship? It seems to be pretty prevalent in our country today. There's a big talk about, fake news and censored news. That is, people trying to get stories out, but they're being suppressed. Real threat, not a real threat.
Well, first place, the First Amendment says that the government cannot interfere with free speech.
I know what it says. I know it doesn't always happen that way, but I'm tracking with you.
Because I know, some people will say that, if a social media platform takes somebody down, it's like, oh, you're censoring. It's like, no, under the First Amendment, it's like, it's their platform and they can decide who gets on it or not.
Okay.
Like, you decided I could be on your podcast.
Right.
And if you said, no, Don, you can't be on the podcast, I can't say my First Amendment rights have been violated because, you have the right to put on whoever you want.
Right. Not a government actor.
Exactly.
Yep. So, real threat, censorship, not a real threat from the journalist perspective.
Well, I think you're not seeing like a government censor going through stories and saying nope.
Okay.
In fact, the Supreme Court has said that any prior restraint of the press comes before the court with dubious constitutionality.
Right.
And I think that one of the bigger problems is just getting access to information. Some agencies are very good, some not so good.
Right.
And we also have the problem with just basically a lot of misinformation, flooding the zone.
Right.
And that's where, people need to be a little bit more savvy in what they're looking for. Just don't go with something just because you agree with it, and look to see where it came from. Was it from a legitimate news organization, or was it somebody working out of their basement, or was it like a foreign operative trying to alter affairs in the country?
Right. Give us a surprising fact about journalist Don Meyer that people would go, "Wow, I didn't know that. Wow, that's interesting. What is it, Don?" Fun fact about Don Meyer.
Okay, well, I was an emergency medical technician for 9 years.
Okay, that is a fun fact. I don't know if that's a fun fact. That's an interesting fact. Where'd you do EMT work?
In New Jersey.
Okay. So you've seen, I'm going to guess, all kinds of trauma.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And was that, were you at some point thinking about that's your line of work, or was that just an interest that you pursued?
That was actually volunteer work.
Okay. All right. We always ask our guests to give us their favorite sort of Washington staple. And when I say staple, I don't just mean a product or food. I mean something about the heart of Washington that it reminds you of this place. It reminds you about what's special here, in particular about the Yakima Valley.
Okay, I would say fresh pressed cider.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah. I had an editor who would do a cider pressing at his home every fall.
Okay.
What he would do is take the week off before and then go out and just get like a whole load of apples.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would just go over to his house on a Saturday afternoon, eat sausage, and press cider.
Right on.
And, you know, the first time I tried it, I'm like, boy, all this other stuff I drank that people told me was cider and apple juice is garbage.
Yeah. This is really good cider.
Yes.
This is the real deal. Right
Yeah,
on.
the good stuff.
So, Don, of all the pieces, and at this point in your career, you've got to be thousands and thousands of stories in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. You got to tell us what was your favorite story.
Favorite story, the one I was proudest of.
Let's do your. They may be different, I take it. So let's
Yeah.
do the one. Let's first start with the story that you are the proudest of. The story that you've put your heart and soul into. What story is that?
Well, this one was actually a bit of a team effort. If you
Okay.
remember, there was a fatal shooting at the Circle K in Yakima. Three
Okay.
people were gunned down.
Yep.
And basically, our entire newsroom was working that story.
Yeah.
You know, I had gotten called and went down to the crime scene while, while they were still doing things there.
Yeah.
And then we heard that they were outside, they had identified a suspect and he was possibly holed up in his home. So a photographer and I, drive out into the East Valley area, and we're just, out there for a couple hours while the SWAT team is trying to talk this guy out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even to the point of throwing, flashbangs in the house.
Yeah.
And then we learned that he was actually not in the house, but was over by Target and eventually shot himself rather than surrender.
Yeah.
And because, the SWAT team was out there looking for him, we knew it's like, okay, he's been charged. That means there should be a court document on file.
Mm-hmm.
So back at the office, we pull up the court document. It was, we got the probable cause affidavit,
Mm-hmm.
where the police outlined everything that happened. And we just had to take that account. We were able, and have you read probable cause affidavits before?
More than I care to admit to, yes.
Yeah, I mean, they're not exactly written as prose,
Right.
but rather just, okay, here are the facts.
Yes.
And so basically, I had to sit down and, weave those facts into a story that explained how this tragedy happened.
Yeah.
Basically just starting with a guy who was abusing meth and locked himself out of his car and got so mad that he shot 3 people.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got to weave all that from just knowing how probable cause affidavits are drafted. And you've got to actually weave that story together from that is a work in and of itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, Phil Farrellito and I worked on that, and, because he had the information from the police news conference, and, the two of us just basically took all this big pile of facts and then just, turned it into, a cogent account of what happened.
Yeah.
And then in follow-up, I talked with a couple criminologists at Central Washington University about, multiple victim homicides, and that, they're actually quite rare. But
Right.
But when they happen, it gets people's attention.
Right. Absolutely.
And in this particular case, these people were just doing very mundane things, just sitting at the gas pumps or waiting for a store employee to cook up some food for them.
Right.
And, just things any of us could be doing. And
Right. Right. And tragedy struck. And you took the time and you put in the effort. And shout out to Phil as well, and your entire team for putting that story together to give us here in the Valley information, albeit about a tragedy, but real factual information that we could rely upon. So thank you. Let me ask you this: the proudest story. What's Don Meyers' what's cherished favorite story? We'll call it your favorite story.
okay. Well, this was in Utah.
Okay.
And have you heard of the Collings Foundation?
It's vague to my memory, but
Okay.
yeah.
They are a group that collects World War II aircraft.
Okay.
And for many years, they had the Wings of Freedom tour where they would fly around the country in some of these
Yep.
vintage aircraft.
Yep.
And they were scheduled to come to Provo. And a city employee had asked the mayor's office, saying, "My dad flew a B-24 in the war. When they come to Provo, is there a chance he could just sit in the cockpit?"
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said, "Well, we'll have to ask the Collings Foundation. We can't make any guarantees."
Okay.
And the Collings Foundation said, "Well, we can't do that. But what we'll do is we'll have you come up to meet us in Heber City,
Okay.
and you'll fly into Provo with us."
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. And I got to accompany him on that trip.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And, he was regaling us with stories of, the war, being a pilot. He said about how, he would fly missions over Vienna, and he said there was, 300 some 88 millimeter anti-aircraft guns, and they were all pointed at him. Yeah.
Wow.
And just to actually be in an actual working B-24, this was not like a reproduction. This was one that actually saw service in the war, and
Yeah.
it gives you an appreciation for what these guys were going through, because it's not a pressurized cabin.
Right. Right.
In fact, you have the waist guns that are just like about a 4x8 window that is just, there's no glass in it, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And, just, relatively thin aluminum skin on the airplane. In fact, they had areas marked where, they're like, you just stay on this line, otherwise you're going to fall through and it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, and just, watching, the incredible thing was, he's up on the flight deck as we're flying through the canyon. And he's standing there and he's just moving his hands in the same way that the pilots were on the controls.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't like he was imitating them. He was just, his years of muscle memory was just,
Wow.
And, it was just a very fun experience.
Right on. Right on. And as you tell that story, I can't even, I think back, and it just draws me back to the men and the women who served under those conditions, right?
Yes.
And what a blessing they were to this nation, and a blessing to all of us who have come after them. And gosh, completely feeling just thoughts of thankfulness for people that actually endured that to give all of us a great future. So here's to fresh pressed cider, number one. But even more than that, here's to the hope that people seek out more information as opposed to simple affirmation. And many, many more years, Don, to you in your reporting and in journalism, and that you would just continue to write great stories that inform us here, all of us here in the heart of Washington. And congratulations for the work done thus far, and we thank you and look forward to the work to come.
Thank you.